a race car and me just feeling that adrenaline, but it was raw, it was real. There was no simulation, it was physics at its best.
How did you do it? What were the things that affected you most?
My neck was destroyed. We have to get 25 kilos. I have to stay there for like a minute and a half. And every month we're increasing the weight because if we rank up, we go up to 3G, 4Gs. You have to be physically able to withstand what the car can offer.
Right now, coming up next, one of the many highlights right here on stage of the ADAC Sim Racing Expo, and this one is nothing less than about a dream, about the dream that pretty much every sim racer has, making it eventually from the sim racing rig to the real racing world. This is exactly what Suellio Almeida did. Let's give it up for Suellio Almeida and Jamie Hoy from Logitech G, taking it from sim to real. Enjoy.
You know, one of the most fascinating things about my job is I get to meet people like Suellio. I get to meet community members like yourself and just hear the unique stories about how they've taken sim to real. I think I've known you for about 5 years now, maybe a little bit longer, and seen his progression through just as a content creator in sim, building a library of racecraft instructional videos. It's just really knowledgeable. And in fact, that's how we first met. And then taking that into the next step onto his first race. And just remember hearing the excitement in his voice and the story that he told just from that race. And then, I don't want to spoil it, but as he continued to grow his profession, he continues to dominate on track. And it's the beauty of my job. And I think you'll be inspired by, Suellio's story today. And I just wrote some few questions. So how did you first get into sim? And, was it something you pursued as a hobby, or did you always have the goal of transitioning to real world racing?
Oh, no, well, first of all, thank you so much. Since I had 8,000 followers on TikTok, you found me. I don't know how, I don't know what you saw, but the support that Logitech G has given to me was so important for me to continue pursuing this. I owe it to you, so thank you so much. It was never a dream. It was never, I never thought it was gonna be possible to go to real life. I never even thought about it. This was my hobby. This was like, I was studying my piano, and then I was tired. I needed to play video games, and this was my video game. And I never planned on making it a career. It was just, having fun. I always played video games all my life, but I wanted to play seriously. It's serious fun. It's serious competitiveness. For the first 3-4 years, I was always trying to be the best at that, and the competitiveness is part of what is fun for me in any game. Anything that I played, I wanted to be the best. I pursued that with sim racing without ever having any thought that I would be here today.
And this is your first rig?
This is probably not the first. This is like the second. This is already, back then, this was fancy for me. Because before the G29, I had a Downforce CT on a laptop, and the screen was the laptop. So this here, VR, that's a lot of money. That's expensive. For me, that was like in Brazil, this is my second rig. This is my upgraded rig. I
love this photo. I mean, you just look at the details of this thing, and you just look at the chair, and he's actually taking the rollers off so that he could push the brake. It's just, it says so much in just the construction of it too. The little surge protector on the left, but I really love this photo. What was the moment in sim racing that made you realize that, all right, let's take this seriously and let's continue to push boundaries and continue to move forward with it?
My goal was never to pursue a sim racing career. It was always a hobby, but when I needed the money to pay for my piano university, I started coaching in sim racing. But without intention, I found a passion. I was very good at coaching, and people loved it, and I loved to just see so many people improving and kind of try to imagine what's going on in their heads and how we can solve those problems, how we can find those seconds. And I started doing more and more and more and more and more. So over the course of a whole year, I realized, wait, I'm doing this. I'm not focusing as much on my piano career anymore. So I didn't notice. It was just a slow transition from a hobby to a job. And I'm not even thinking about real racing yet. I quit piano to focus on sim racing without even thinking that I would eventually go to real racing. I never thought about that. And so that's the first big realization. It was actually a year-long transition. I had to finish my master's degree and just stop piano, and then piano became my hobby. The second realization that I could actually drive in real life, it was not me. It was a phone call. Some random guy said, just found my phone number and called me. Hey, do you want to race in real life? I was like, what? This is impossible. I never even conceived, imagined. Like, it's impossible for me. I remember that I almost said no. And I was like, that's not for me. He insisted a little bit. We talked a little bit. This was back in 2021 when I just became Canadian sim racing champion in iRacing. So he called me. We did a test day. The first 10 minutes were a disaster because I was so used to my rig, and then the pedal was very heavy, everything like high force feedback. And then I got into a GT86 with brake boosters. So the first time I went on a straight to start braking to the corner, I just smashed the brakes, and then both of us went forward like that because I had no idea how the car was going to behave. And then I took those 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, the first session to realize that, hey, I can actually do this. I started talking to the car, and then that's when, at the end of that day, I was 1 second slower than the instructor, and they were like, wow, that's not possible, like how? And that's when I realized, wait, if I actually invest more time, maybe 1 year, 2 years, I can actually be very competitive in this. And this is where the third part of my life started, which is now transitioning from sim to real life.
I'm sure that's a natural progression of, you started getting into sim, you started building your rigs, and this is this newest rig. You started getting into finding and uncovering how to get faster. Is that when you started getting into racecraft? Is that when you started to really understanding and learning about all the different aspects and the technical aspects of racing?
Actually, no. I think it was very early in your career. You can already start thinking about technique. As long as you buy wheel and pedals, you can already start thinking about driving technique, physics, car handling dynamics, racecraft, battle for position. You can already do all of this. You don't have to have any expensive equipment to be able to work on these things. And I realized this because when I was coaching, I remember I was already top 1% in iRacing, and I was coaching a lot of drivers with direct drive. I didn't know what direct drive was. For me, it was just more expensive equipment, but I had a G39 and I was 3 seconds faster than them, and allowing them and helping them go faster. And then when I did get a direct drive, I started realizing, okay, this helps me only on this specific thing, but until you actually benefit from expensive equipment, you need to already be very good.
Mm-hmm.
So no, very early I already started consuming all content. I was reading everything. Carol Smith, Ross Bentley, Viper Concept YouTube. I don't know if you guys know, like he was doing theoretical stuff on YouTube and helping us understand the physics of it. And I was just consuming as much content as possible very early on with the Logitech, and that's I think what made the biggest difference.
Yeah, and that stuff comes across super clear when you watch his content. And this is one of the episodes that he did. That's what attracted me to him. It's just I was myself trying to learn how to get faster, roaming through social media, stumbled upon this, started watching more, and that's how I also enhanced or advanced my racecraft. And it was super interesting. So very insightful stuff, and you can tell you have a passion for it. You can tell you have the expertise behind it. And then you mentioned, the Porsche Esports Cup, but what tools, or what platforms do you think played a biggest role in becoming a real driver, or the skill sets to become a real driver?
Yeah, I think every game, every simulator that I did had a role on my stage. I remember I started playing Need for Speed Underground, and then I went to Gran Turismo, and then I went to Assetto Corsa, and then I went to iRacing. So each stage had its role to help me, to teach me racecraft, to teach me driving technique, to teach me, finding a team. It was actually the platform and the people around the platform and the events in the platform and the races. So all those things were shaping my career, and all of them had very important roles.
You mentioned your first experience, how fast you were, or how you're with the instructor, but what did that feel like? What was it like stepping in? And if you were to compare the two, right, sim versus real, what did it feel like when you first stepped in that car? What was the differences? What could you take away?
It felt surreal at first. When you watch a movie, there's always music behind and there's always effects and everything, but it was me there. No music, nothing, just reality. A race car and me just feeling that adrenaline, but it was raw, it was real, and it took a lot for me to realize that I was doing that and feeling absolutely everything. There was no simulation, it was physics at its best, and it felt like I was, I don't know, in a different state, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
For the first,
I'm sure adrenaline was kicking in a little bit on that first race. That's the first time you step in the car.
Exactly, and then it was so much to take in, so much information to digest, that my brain was in full mode, full power mode. I knew I could do it, but it was very intense. It was very overwhelming. I think overwhelming is a good word, in a good way, in a very good way.
And how would you compare it to sim? Like, what are some of the similarities that, you know, anybody here would feel just immediately got on track outside of the adrenaline rushes and outside of the speed, the G-forces, the physical aspects? What are some of the techniques that really translated to the track that you're on?
Honestly, 99.9% of the skills transfer, all of it. Like, real life is sim racing plus the physical aspects and the financial aspects. Of course, you have to relearn some new things, the way your body moves around with the G-forces and how you have to adapt to that, how you have to predict where you're going to be, like where your body's going to be. And then even when you're braking, when you're turning before braking, in real life, your leg is moving around. So you have to be very careful with like positioning it right. So there's extra stuff that you have to learn on top. But what you learned in sim goes to real life. Like all the techniques, all the trail braking, not trail braking, setup knowledge, track knowledge, the idea of like camber, off camber, elevation changes, it's all there. It's all there 100%. So you practice 10,000 hours in the simulator. You go to real life, you're years ahead, many years ahead of someone who is starting in real life with no simulator.
That was going to be my question. Yeah, it kind of does expedite the process of becoming fast. It's just getting over those physical aspects.
A lot.
Interesting.
I mean, when I got into Radical series, some of my competitors have 30 years of experience, my age of experience, and I beat them.
Yeah.
They didn't have the sim. I had the sim. And of course, like, that's one of the factors, but like I was so obsessed about benefiting from the sim that it worked in real life. And everything that I want the car to do, it does. I never crashed. I never spun my Radical.
Do you think that helps?
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
100%. Because in the sim, I know how to train. And I say this to my students all the time. If you can cause it, you can prevent it. So if you're afraid of spinning and you have a coaching session with me, I say, okay, spin it. Then show me how you can on purpose spin the car. Because if you know how you can cause it, then immediately you know how to prevent it. And then this is how I use the sim.
Mm-hmm.
I use the sim to explore all the possibilities so that I can create the safe driving styles that I could translate to real life, and it worked.
How did you compensate with the physical aspects? So I guess two things. How did you do it? What were the things that affected you most physically? Because I know many of us, if we were to go on track, you just mentioned, you know, your ability to stay on the brake, where in here we'd have 0 G-forces for it to fly off. In fact, we're probably wearing socks. So what are the things that you looked out for? What comes to mind? How did you overcome those physical limitations?
I had to completely change my life. I have to completely change my routine. I started working out, eating better, sleeping better, being a lot more disciplined. And it was just, I mean, it felt weird. Like, I always played video games all my life. And then suddenly I go to my Instagram and change it to athlete. Like, it felt weird. But I had to identify myself as an athlete to create the habit and to do the things that an athlete does. And that's what 2023 and 2024 was for me. It was that transition to real life. Is not only driving a real car, it's becoming a real driver physically. So you can overcome it. I mean, it's very hot. It's very stressful. There's a lot of pressure. And the G-forces, my neck was destroyed the first few months. Actually, we got 2.7 Gs in the Radical. That's a lot. So we're training that with my personal trainer, and we have to get 25 kilos, and I have to stay there for like a minute and a half. And every month we're increasing the weight, because if we rank up, we go up to 3G, 4G. So you have to be physically able to withstand what the car can offer. And that's the biggest difference. So you have to really change who you are to be able to deal with that.
So now you have a few races under your belt. You're really, getting into full stride. How do you continue to prove, or what are the areas that you then focused on to be able to propel your real racing career and move that forward? What are the things that you focused on after that?
It has to be everything in a way. Every factor helps. So you have to drive well. You have to prepare in the simulator. You have to be healthy. You have to work on your marketability. You have to work in making the sponsors happy. You have to make the funds to race. So every aspect is critical. You just have to be very aware, very disciplined, so that you don't miss anything. That's why it's mentally taxing to stay on top of everything. That's why it's so important to have, for example, a good team, or to have people around you that are gonna help you achieve all those things. So it's a little bit of everything. You cannot miss it. it's high stakes for sure. So
Maybe talk about your car. This is your
my baby.
your new car.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was weird because in January this year, I had no idea I was gonna do that. I remember I woke up, I was on track, I was in a hotel in Florida testing another Radical at Sebring. And then I woke up in the morning just with the decision, I'm gonna buy a Radical. I'm gonna buy a Radical.
It's a radical move.
It just happened. And then my friends were like, what? Like why? Like how? And I had the funds because I had exploded the year before in my online courses. And I didn't know exactly what to do with the money, but it had to be reinvested in racing. I knew that my goal was to grow in racing. So I took all the money that I had, literally, like, because in a race car, when you buy it, you don't split the payment, you pay upfront. Then I realized that it was gonna be the year to prove, to make noise, to make a statement, to prove a point that a sim racer could do it. And I needed to represent my brand, of course, because that's how I funded it. That's why I painted it in my colors, in the colors of the Motor Racing Academy. And it worked. I didn't crash it. That's a big risk, of course, when you buy a new car. And I did the Radical US Championship, which was something I didn't expect to be in the podium ever. Like, I just wanted to be there and be midfield competitive.
Sure.
But then I realized that I could actually be champion. And over the year, that's what I went all in for that. And all my life was about making this happen.
Something particular that an audience member should focus on in sim that would prepare them for this?
I think I actually just launched a video on YouTube about that, because what really matters is that you're driving following principles. You're not just mimicking and memorizing braking references and being like a zombie on track. You don't want that. You don't want to mimic guides and ask people, hey, what gear do you use here? Where do you brake? What line do you take? My approach to all my students, I insist so much, find the right principles and follow these principles so that you can find these answers yourself, because then you become adaptable. If you go to real life and there's no one there to tell you where to brake, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna find the braking zone? So I think it's a matter of being autonomous in your technique development and being fully aware of how you're finding the limit on a very technical level. And that makes such a difference, because you can mimic people and be fast, really fast, but you're gonna depend on that, and at some point it's gonna bite you. So if you learn how to be autonomous, how to, instead of following benchmarks, to be the benchmark, you can have anything. You can rain, or like, the track can be dirty, or whatever can happen. You're gonna know exactly how to adapt to it. So for example, my students that overdrive the car a lot, or just try to use the sim in a way that they're not doing in real life, I say, yo, let's be careful. Like, try to find a way to drive in the simulator that you will do in real life. That everything that you do is gonna become a habit. You're creating a muscle memory. So if you create a bad muscle memory of just overdriving and going off all the time in the sim, and then you go to real life, that's gonna kick in. Like, even without you thinking, you're gonna try to go a little bit too fast in the wrong time. So I always try to imagine that you are in real life when you are in the simulator. Crash the least possible, spin the least possible, and learn how to approach that in a safe way that you can then 100% transfer without being worried about it.
And is there a natural progression or step that they need to take? And it could be as simple as like a track day. Is there something that could get them moving in the right direction if they want to take their experience, their skills, their techniques, and bring it into a series? Or just a track day, something simple like that. You know, 1 or 2 bullet points of a transition that they can make.
I come from sim racing, no family, nothing in real life. I didn't know what to do. So my team that called me, that guy that called me in 2021, he had a plan for me. So we did endurance grassroots with a GT86, with a GT car, no karting. We just went straight to cars. And those events are like 8-hour races and very accessible, like $1,000, $2,000. So that was what helped me really get a feel for real life without being so much high stakes. And I did a whole year of that, of like grassroots racing. But I mean, that's the route that I took, because that's the advice that I got from that team. But I really don't have a lot of experience to say, because you can come from karting, you can do other forms of racing that I really don't have a lot of experience with. So my story was GT86, and then right away I did some Formula 4 racing schools at Miami, and then I bought the Radical.
And that's the beauty of everyone's story here, is that everyone has a unique and everyone has a different entryway.
Yeah.
And each entryway, whether it be karting or whether it be through, you know, your route, is something that maybe another person could do. And maybe someone out here could take that same route or find their own. And that's the beauty of when we talk about how do you still use sim as a training regimen today? And do you think the role of sim in motorsports will evolve in the future?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's already reaching such a state where all Formula One drivers have to spend hours and hours and hours in the sim. It's their obligation. They have to. The team needs the data. They need the training, and they now understand how sim is a training tool that is the cost effectiveness of that is just like crazy, and you have to do it. You have to do it. That's why we see so many super fast drivers still using the sim. So what I see right now is that you don't have two options, karting or sim. They do karting, they do sim, because now they understand how important it is. And I have many students now that are 8 years old, 7, 9, and they are karters, but they have the sim. And they understand, they give just as much importance to the simulator. I have a student who is, I think he's 9 now, and he's 3,000 iRating. I'm like, how? Like 3,000 iRating, that's like top 2% in iRacing, and he is 9 years old. So just imagine like where he is going, doing karting and already being so disciplined and so performant in the sim. So yes, I think right now the trend, it's not new anymore that, oh, sim racing might be a way. No, everyone knows already. I mean, that was like 3-4 years ago. You need to do it. Like it's a requirement for you to really perform well. I know that because in 2023 I was racing Formula 4 with a lot of 15-year-old, 16-year-old, and they were all already doing the sim. They were all already in iRacing. They were seriously building their careers in real life and using the sim.
Now, I always end with this question. It's probably the most difficult question. What is in still for your future? Like, what do you see? We all want to know, like, what's next? Where do you want to, what's your goals?
Yeah, it is difficult actually, because it is what I'm spending the most energy right recently. I just became champion in the Radical Championship in the US, and that for me is still sinking in. Since that happened, I got 10-15 offers of teams to race, even the 24 hours of Daytona. Like, what? And then of course that means finding the sponsors. I'm still working on that. That means, preparing for that. And this is the high level stuff now. But this is the racing side. Of course, my big passion is actually coaching. I have the Motor Racing Academy right now. We're 10 people, we're growing. We have 7,000 students. We have events, we have league races. And I'm so passionate about that. I know that at some point that's going to become a real life racing school. That's going to become a real life racing program. That might become a real life racing team. So the academy is my passion as well as racing, and I'm just making sure that I find the right balance to continue being the coach that I love to be, as well as a racing driver.
Amazing. And then again, I'm spoiled. I get to hear this story often. I want to thank you guys for listening to Suellio. He's amazing, and I hope you guys felt the same way, because every time I listen to him, it just, I always have a smile on my face. So thank you, Suellio, and I appreciate everyone for listening.
If you're a racing driver and you want to reach an advanced level, there's a faster and easier way to become competitive. I've gone from this to this in 5 years. Now, we've created the perfect free driver development guide to help you understand the right order of racing skills to develop if you want to become a competitive driver as quickly as possible. This guide was made after 3,000 hours of combined high-level coaching.